A good rule of thumb is you don't want to take business advice from folks who don't have a business, don't run a business. Same thing with taking like life advice from a 12-year-old, 15-year-old, right? Life coach teenager, right? It's probably not a good idea.
There, actually, I think.
You also, on that same vein, don't want to take weight shift, pressure shift advice from people who don't measure. What we use is a dual plate force system. So 1 foot, 1 plate for each foot. So
which is important.
Really see what's happening in the golf swing. We're going to show you kind of 3 common scenarios we see golfers come in with and how that concept really affects what they're doing in the ground, and then show you how to fix it. So the first one that we see every single day, saw it 3 times yesterday. Golfer came in and was trying to be more of a centered pivot and then not sway.
This one I have some experience with because when I first started learning about all this, we're always trying to work on our own games, and selfishly enough, a lot of the stuff that we buy is for our own games.
That's right.
Because we want to play better too.
That's right.
So what I figured out with the force plates, especially the dual plate system, is that I was trying to stay too centered in the first part of the backswing. Well, in my mind, I realized I didn't have enough momentum, so I would make a late shift, and I was a baseball pitcher. So the shifting was, more like this, where the weight stayed on your back foot for a longer period of time. It's not quite that way in golf. So the centered pivot would cause me to shift right late, and then that didn't allow me to use the ground and the pressure in the correct way.
So you were accomplishing a center pivot, meaning nothing was really moving. Then the later you got in the backswing, the more kind of forces you had to generate late.
Trying to get momentum somewhere.
Right.
So I would do it late. I was having to overuse almost muscling the swing instead of getting some help from the overall dynamic motion.
And the killer for that, well, for your swing, and we see so many golfers, is when you spike this right foot near the top of the swing, you now have to use this right foot to start to push forward on. Not only slides the hip out of position, but it also moves that pressure back.
I call it the hip launch. When they sit on that hip late, they push off it, and it also causes some early extension problems, keeps the pressure back too long, so not really something you want to do in the swing.
The best players in the world shift an inch and a half off to the right. That helps them spike that pressure to the right and those forces in the right foot early. So they're using a weight shift and a pressure shift, using the weight to help spike the pressure early.
Someone will say maybe, well, most golfers, they don't get to their left side enough. Yeah, but the fix isn't just to stay in the middle.
Right.
We've been playing around with this for a long time in a lot of different ways. It's actually easier to get where you need to go at impact by going away from the ball a little bit. It's more natural.
There has to be a counter movement. So
get the counter movement.
If I want to jump as high as I could back in my playing days in college, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't. Now this would simplify my jump tremendously
well,
if I got right here.
because you're staying closer to the rim.
Right. I know I got to go up here, so I'm going to go right here and just try to jump straight up.
Yeah.
I could jump a little bit, maybe slide some paper under my foot, or I could go and have that counter movement away from where I'm trying to go to help me get there better.
Absolutely.
Now, that can be way overdone. I can go down here and I'm not going to jump any higher. So it's not that you're moving to the right that's bad, it's how much you're moving to the right or not to the right at all.
And when.
And when.
And jumping's such a great analogy because it's kind of a ballistic down, just like you want some dynamic motion early in the swing. It all ties together.
Right, so what's the fix for that? What did you do to fix that?
The fix is I had to feel like I had a counter movement toward the target a little bit in my swing. I'll kind of lighten my trail foot and then go into my right, my trail foot.
So you created a dynamic trigger to your swing.
I did, and it helped me a lot feel this trigger left, away, back to the left, which is our recentering term, and then lighten the trail foot again. And that creates this back and forth motion with the pressure and starts moving these arrows the way that I wanted to move them, which allowed me to get more club head speed with less effort.
So really changing how you start made that sequence much better, happen earlier, and you got more dynamic in the downswing.
It made it natural, feeling like an athlete, which is what we preach, right? And that trigger move is a big deal.
We want you to be able to see all the differences here in the side-by-side view. The first thing to notice is how Shaun starts moving his pressure and ground forces on the right side of your screen even before he starts to move the club. That's the trigger he was talking about, and it's one that many pros use to get the swing started dynamically. As he reaches the halfway point of his backswing, notice how flat his right and left foot forces are here on the left, and as a result of that, how static his center of pressure arrow has remained throughout the first part of his backswing. Contrast that with how he's used that trigger to generate an early spike in his right foot as he shifted his pressure to the right. The larger blue arrow and the fact that it's angled towards his center of mass is what keeps him from overswaying in his backswing. As he gets to the top, he's recentering on the right, which starts to bring his pressure arrow back towards his front side. But because he was so static during the first half of his backswing on the left, he shifts towards his trail side late, which sends both his pressure and mass in the wrong direction. In order for your ground forces to help you with increasing speed, you must generate them early, way earlier than impact. And with that in mind, you can see the head start he's given himself here on the right side of your screen. When the shaft is vertical, think of this as the make or break point in the downswing. This is where you want to have a large portion of your ground forces coming from your left side. It's got to happen this early. You also want those arrows pointed in front of your center of mass. That provides you with a big torque-producing lever, which we'll talk about here more in a minute. But if you have those arrows pointing behind your center of mass at this point in the swing, you're creating a mechanical disadvantage. Now, the golf swing can be hard enough as it is without doing this to yourself in the downswing. In looking at these swings side by side, two things should really stand out to you. Number one, unless you have predator vision, it's impossible to see any of this from just looking at video. And two, better dynamic movement early is the key to moving better dynamically later in the golf swing. There's actually a third stat that might surprise you as well. 67% of you watching this video haven't yet subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy our videos, please don't forget to tap the subscribe button down below. Subscribing helps our channel grow, and that helps us to continue to put out the best information we possibly can for your golf swing. So another version we see guys try all the time, it's the idea of in the downswing, I'm gonna keep my hips tilted down or my left hip lower. I'm gonna wheel this left knee around, kind of spread the knees, and that's gonna shift pressure forward without moving my mass forward. Sounds good on paper, but it actually creates a mechanical disadvantage because it throws pressure to the back foot.
What that looks like is, let's say you did shift to the right early, which is good, right? Get off the baller early, your knee comes in a little with the turn. The problem with just doing the leg this way, normally it lightens the foot up too much.
So to twist that foot around, you can't have a lot of weight on that front foot.
Right, right.
So if it's not on the front foot, it's going to be on the back foot.
And once I do that, it almost backs the hips up a little bit too, so it pushes all of the pressure back into the back foot.
And then guys who do that will also, and this kind of is foreshadowing a little bit the next one, push off late coming into impact, and when you push off a foot, so lightening one foot moves pressure to the opposite foot.
That's a big key. Say that again.
Lightening one foot moves pressure to the opposite foot.
Think about that one.
Pushing off of one foot moves pressure to that foot.
And it also locks the leg,
exactly,
which hurts rotation.
So you're getting kind of a double disadvantage there when you actually do it, and that's the key. Guys who will practice this will oftentimes start doing it, and the pressure stays back, and then they push off late, which keeps it back there longer. Now your force vectors are going behind your center of mass. Now you got all sort of disadvantages for rotation and generating speed when you actually do it.
Yeah, and those vectors are staying too vertical too.
Right.
You don't get the advantage of having the moment arm.
So instead, what do we want to have happen?
So once we get to the top here, well, we're away early, pressure away, a little bit of weight away. We recenter, the knees are whatever distance apart they are. From here, I'm turning the hips. The right knee is actually getting closer to the left. The only reason my knee looks like it's wheeling out some or externally, it looks that way, is because my hips are turning. I'm not physically taking the knee and rotating it in relation to my hip.
Here's another aspect of the golf swing where the look from a video camera has hurt a lot of golfers. All the 3D data we've collected from Gears comes from tracking 34 markers we place on the golfer's body and club. Some of you might be under the impression that we take the measurements from the avatar. We don't. The avatar is just a visual aid. All the measurements come from the actual markers placed on the body, and 2 of those markers are highlighted right here. The yellow dot on your screen is the marker placed on the outside of this major champion's right knee. The red dot is the marker placed on the outside of his left knee. The distance above his head is how far apart these markers are in real time. And this is the only viable view for seeing the spacing of the knees as they move during the swing. As our pro swings to the top, you can see he increases the distance between his knees by about 1/2 inch. We've measured this distance on players who've won over 330 tournaments on tour, including over 20 majors. Average for those players is roughly 0 change from address to the top. So this player has an above average increase in his knee separation from address to the top. As we walk him down to impact, you can see how his knees work closer together, not further apart. At no point did his knees get wider than they were at the top on his way to impact. And you've no doubt seen a video of this player's swing online. You'll also see comments under those videos talking about his knee spread. And from a face-on view, his knees look like they're the closest at the top, then look as if they gradually separate and get wider in the first half or so of his downswing. That look, and I put look in quotes, that look is literally the opposite of what he's actually doing. But every week we see golfers trying to do the same thing with their knees based on a look that's the opposite of reality. And that creates a lot of hurdles for those golfers with how they move and try to generate ground forces. All right, so we kind of alluded to this a second ago. And it's golfers who are getting down into the downswing and they want to move. They see TV, they know pros have their weight forward in the golf swing. So they're trying to get their weight forward as well. And they're doing that by pushing off this back foot. And you get two disadvantages with that. One, it straightens this left leg and tends to lock it, which tends to lock the trail hip.
Bad thing number one.
Two is when I'm pushing off my trail foot, that's putting pressure under my trail foot.
Not really what you want to do.
So your mass will move left, but your pressure is going to the opposite side, which is going to create issues for you. Mm-hmm. So when we demonstrate this to them, very easy way. So I'll say, Shaun, I want you to put 100% of pressure on your lead foot, and I'll stand here and kind of block him off. All right, what do we see all the time?
They use the trail foot to push, which
Right.
actually sends the pressure the opposite way they're trying to do.
So they're moving their mass towards me and really pushing into me, but all the pressure spikes in that trail foot. And they go, okay, it locks them up.
It locks them up hard.
So then we'll say, all right, let's switch positions. Usually I might be a little bit bigger than the player, so they really brace, and I'll just go like this. I'll just pick this back foot up, which moves all of my pressure to my front foot.
Yeah, he makes a great point. So if you want to shift pressure to each foot, all you have to do is lighten the opposite foot. You lighten the opposite foot a lot of times by changing the knee flex, which is part of the whole dynamic motion of the swing.
Yeah, that's a fast way to change pressure. Moving the mass is kind of slow.
It will move the pressure.
Yeah.
And there's some of that.
But if I do this, I'm not moving my mass much, but I'm rapidly changing the pressure in my feet. I'm weighting and unweighting my feet. That's what, when Shaun holds my shoulder here, I'm moving 100% of my pressure there, even though he's not letting me drift that way.
That's
so I can do it this way, or I can just do it like that.
This is what the two different impacts would look like. This is someone who's pushing off their right foot, and
hips are almost always going to be way out here past the ankle.
Yeah, and the knees are too far apart.
Yep.
And they're too straight, both legs. We see it on gears all the time. This is what you want to see. I just lightened up my trail leg by lightening up the foot using the knee flex change.
So you didn't throw your mass way out here, but you shifted your pressure way over here, and you've got your body lined up over that left leg.
Yeah, so you get your recentering back to kind of fit, in the middle with your pelvis. If I lighten the trail leg as I keep going forward, that puts me in the right place with my pressure, gets my mass in the right place, not too far forward, too far back. So that's a good thought, is lightening the opposite foot to move pressure.
What you're looking at now is the what if model that's in our Gas Labs force plate software. This large yellow arrow is the pressure vector. It's the same red arrow you've been seeing throughout this video. Adding the right foot and left foot force vectors is what produces this pressure vector and ultimately your pressure trace. What's cool about this little model is we can move these foot vectors around and see how those changes affect the golfer's pressure. Pay special attention to the big donut around the golfer's center mass. And, to be honest, this is usually where donuts typically wind up. How we move his force arrows will change the yellow pressure arrow's relation to the golfer's center of mass. And what's important to understand is that when you spin this donut in the correct direction, you'll be creating a nice torque advantage in your golf swing. But if you spin it in the wrong direction, you're going to be creating a big disadvantage for yourself that we talked about earlier. As we move his arrow into this common position that we've shown earlier, you're going to see that donut start to spin clockwise. It's spinning in that direction because this big pressure arrow is shooting up behind the golfer's center of mass. And that force created by this player's poor concept of how to move pressure is working to torque him in the wrong direction. As you've seen already, this can be caused by a late shift, by trying to wheel that front knee around, or a late push off the back foot. In either case, it's creating a big disadvantage you'll have to try to overcome in the downswing. Now compare that to this scenario. Now his foot forces have swung the pressure arrow to the front of his center of mass, causing his donut to rotate in the correct direction. This creates a very useful advantage for you in the downswing. And the farther that arrow moves away from the center of mass, the bigger the advantage will be. Think of it like trying to turn a lug nut on a wheel. Would you have to try to exert way more force using a small wrench, or would it be much easier work to use a large wrench? That's your moment arm in the downswing. So the takeaway, make sure you're turning your wrench in the right direction. That's first and foremost. Then make sure you're creating a large enough wrench for yourself by adopting what you've seen throughout this video. So maybe you've tried to shift weight and pressure in one of these three ways, or maybe you've tried all three of these ways. Kind of rethink what you're doing, understand what actually moves what. You can move weight and pressure together, or you can move them separately. You want to make sure you're doing them one at the right time, two in the correct way to really start to add some speed and athleticism to your golf swing.
If you want more compression on your iron shots, more tour quality, solid iron shots every time you go out to play, we created a free video just for you. In the pinned comment below, you're gonna find a link. Click on the link, gonna be taken to another page. You're gonna enter your name and your email address. Once you do that, you're gonna be taken instantly to the free video training where you're gonna learn our #1 go-to drill to get more compression on your iron shots, which is gonna allow you to hit more greens and have more fun playing the game. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and give us a like, give us a thumbs up. Also, if you have a question about the video or there's a topic you want us to cover in a future video, leave it down in the comments below. We read every single comment and we respond to them, and that's how we create new content for you in the future. Now, if you haven't already, go ahead and click the subscribe button so you know exactly when one of our new videos comes out.